With evidence of policy failures in the United States and ill-conceived wars and interventions abroad, author Alastair Roberts believes it's not surprising that government is regarded by some as a mess. But what exactly is government supposed to do? And is the track record of Western governments so awful? Roberts' latest book, Can Government Do Anything Right?, explores just that.
So I noticed about 4 years ago that people were talking a lot about the apparent collapse of democracy, and
The world is going to end.
That's right. Everything was going to pieces, and I thought that's overwrought. And so what I wanted to do was kind of explore what is really going on. And I did this book this year, and I did another book called Four Crises of American Democracy, which came out last year. And it's basically trying to put our current predicament in perspective.
And I also appreciated about the book how not only, when you say perspective, not only U.S. perspective, but you broaden it quite a bit. So it gives us a sense of more of a global community. One of the things, though, that occurred to me in the book, when we look at the process of government and lawmaking, it can seem to me so reactionary, right? We have a problem, whether it's a problem with guns or a problem with Facebook, and then we react to try and make laws that can help us solve these problems. And I was wondering, I want to hear your thoughts on, what if we put, term limits on people who are holding elected office? They would come out of the private sector or their job, serve for a bit, and then go back in the industry. Do you think that would help for people to be less reactionary and more proactive?
I'm not sure that would really do much to make politics and the policy process a lot better. There are jurisdictions that have tried term limits, and they turn out to have their own problems. And I think really the big problem in American politics today and in a lot of other Western countries isn't really about small things like term limits. It's about big things, about big ideas, about what do we think government is supposed to be doing, what should government be doing with regard to the economy, what are government's basic obligations, and how do they execute them. So it's more of a crisis of big ideas than these kind of small technical fixes.
Sort of the ways to get in there and tinker. You point out in the book this concept of 4 goals for government, mastery over circumstances, recognition of the state's right to govern territory, advancement of human rights, and promotion of economic growth. Do you think that one of those areas in particular is more important, or should leaders work to balance all 4 of those goals?
Well, so the basic idea is that there are these basic goals that are always operating. Leaders are always worried about them, but the relative priority of goals changes over time. It depends on the moment, it depends on circumstances. And so, for example, in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, before concerns about domestic terrorism, people could kind of put security to the side a bit and focus on globalization, economic growth through the growth of global markets. And more recently, we've begun to see the limits of that strategy, and so people are rebalancing, right? One of the things we're thinking about is that the right way of promoting prosperity? Should we be worrying more about security?
Interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of how you segmented the world, you really broke it down by states. And I was struck by the number that you pointed out, 195 states. Makes the world seem a lot smaller when you break it down in that way. Why did you approach it from that perspective?
Well, one of the things that's going on is that in the 1990s, we thought we were entering what was called a borderless world. People were talking about the end of the nation state. The world is flat and all that deal. And the state, this kind of basic building block of political order, countries, have come roaring back. And you can see that, for example, in President Trump's rhetoric and in the politics in Europe and so on. So one of the points I'm making in the book here is that the state is back as the kind of fundamental unit of political life. And we're trying to figure out, how much do borders matter and so on.
Yeah, in certain circles, very much is the answer to that one.
That's right.
As I mentioned before, the book really looks at not only the states, but a more global perspective. And 2 stats that jumped out to me that I thought were interesting. So you pointed out a 2016 Gallup poll that said only 10% of people had a lot of confidence in Congress here in the United States. But we go across the pond to the UK, and 4 in 5 Britons don't trust their politicians to tell the truth. So interesting to see that this is not a problem unique to the United States, right?
No, there are a lot of Western democracies are going through this apparent crisis of legitimacy. And they went through a similar crisis in the 1970s and the 1930s as well, this feeling that everything was falling apart. And one of the other interesting elements in all of these crises, people were also looking at non-democratic regimes and thinking, you know, those guys seem to be doing a lot better. So, for example, today, a lot of folks look at China and say, well, China seems to have its act together. It's not a democracy, but it has its act together. So one of the reasons I'm writing this book is to say, look, you know, let's take a long view, and let's not jump to conclusions about whether democracy works or doesn't work based on a kind of short-term crises.
Yeah, I liked a phrase you used in the book. You said that the book, you know, while you're looking at these different problems, they are not portents of immediate collapse. Why is that, you think?
Well, so the basic idea here is that governing is hard. You know, we talked about the 4 basic goals that leaders are trying to follow. But the strategies they use to pursue those goals are really complicated, and they're contingent on circumstances. And circumstances change. So leaders are constantly trying to reinvent their approach to security, toward human rights, toward prosperity. They're constantly have to reinvent the strategy. And that means sometimes taking apart old ideas and putting together new ideas. And what we're going through right now is one of those phases where we're kind of abandoning old ideas and trying to figure out, okay, what's the path forward? And the critical point we need to bear in mind is that every state has to do this, democratic or not. And one of the things that democracies are good at doing is kind of reinventing themselves. It's painful, but they can do it. A contrast would be a state like the Soviet Union, which tried in the 1980s to do it, perestroika, and couldn't. It was too brittle, and it just basically collapsed. So we go through these painful adjustments, but at least we survive. We're resilient.
You also look ahead sort of to the next 30 years in the book, and you point out that there are 4 problems to likely persist here, right? And you see them also intensifying potentially as we move forward: terrorism, climate change, power rivalries, and economic inequality. And then you also point out that, you know, you can approach this from 2 ways, right? You can be more open and forward-looking, or maybe more insular and defensive. But is there not some gray area there as well?
Well, that's right. And a lot of these challenges are making us think more about borders, right? And what it means to be a nation, and make us think more about security. And that's probably means we're going to be a little less open than we were in the 1990s, the era of the borderless world. But we also want to be careful not to overreact, because a lot of these trends kind of induce anxiety. They induce a sense of uncertainty and fear, and the tendency is to kind of hunker down. And what we want to do is resist going too far in that direction, because when you're facing all of these new challenges, you have to be open to new ideas. You have to be thinking creatively about how you adapt and kind of go with the flow, how you accommodate turbulence. And so you want to preserve a certain degree of openness. You want to preserve a society that's open to learning and adaptation, because that, in the long run, is how democracies in all states really survive.